Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, for those of you watching this on video, you're going to see I might be a little bit distracted. At the time of this recording, we are in the very early stages of a hurricane that's going to be hitting ground here shortly. Fortunately, we're only looking at a baby hurricane, a Cat 1 as it stands right now. But that's not why we're here to talk today. If you're wondering why we're bringing Rocky LaGrone on the show and who he is, I first became introduced to Rocky about a year ago. For those of you who know me and know Predictable Profits, you know that one of our unique abilities is in working with and developing sales teams and creating world-class conversion experts. And that involves how you're hiring the right team and managing the team and coaching them and so forth. If you've been involved in hiring salespeople before, you know how expensive it can be in making the wrong hire. So it's really important that we found a tool, and not just any tool, but the best tool that allowed us not only to quantifiably measure who would be the best hire against all other candidates, but also for existing teams, who's in the right seat, what type of coaching do they need, so we can isolate the particular area. Rocky is an expert at OMG. In fact, Rocky was assigned when we became licensed distributors of OMG. Rocky was assigned to our account as our main go-to resource of all things OMG in order to be able to assist us to make sure we got the most out of the product. So why don't we just start with a nice, easy question? Tell us a little bit about OMG and why, in your humble opinion, OMG is the best tool possible for quantifying sales abilities, so to speak.
Yeah, let me give you kind of how I got into OMG, because you kind of shared how you got into OMG, and I'll answer that question as well, and why I really bleed OMG. And when we say OMG, we're talking about Objective Management Group, truly the only sales specific assessment organization in the world. All of the other assessment tools out there that you have probably seen or used, DISC, there's lots of different versions of DISC, predictive index. There's lots of different versions of that. Chally, a couple of different versions of that now. And the assessment world, if you look at it, every single one of them except us was built on the foundation of PF16, which stands for Personal Factors 16. And if you go backwards, you can look at Myers and Briggs. Some of you may have heard of that and the different combinations of that. Good stuff. A lot of people don't know is Myers and Briggs were Carl Jung's second wife and stepdaughter, and they carried on his work to create Myers-Briggs. And then he really took on Freud's work, and you can trace Freud's work all the way back to Plato and Socrates. So there's really nothing new in that world, except when you start taking information that was built to identify personalities, behaviors, aptitude, cognitive reasoning. They're all great tools for what they were designed for, but they are borrowed into sales. They weren't built for sales. It's not sales specific. And so what they're saying in personality assessments is, hey, here's your communication style. Here's what your likes are. Here's what your dislikes are. You either like hard charging, bottom line, let's go, or maybe you like numbers and processes and systems and tools. You want to be left in a corner and don't really want to interact with people too much, might be introverted. And some of the best salespeople I've ever met are introverted. So it's not about a personality style that predicts sales success. What they are suggesting when they say someone who has these personality styles and communication factors are good in sales, they're really saying they're good at building relationships and they're good at making friends, which certainly is a part of sales and communication and building relationships and leveraging those. But it's not a predictor of success. What it predicts is that individual can go out and make friends, but making friends doesn't make sales. Otherwise, all of our friends would be clients. So that's a bad choice and a predictor for sales success. And then if you look at behavioral assessments, you probably read many of these reports too, and the audience has probably seen many of them when you look at the 12 factors of high performance sales behaviors. Maybe it's 15, maybe the study's 12, maybe they boil it down to 6. And I don't disagree with any of those behaviors, but what behavioral studies do is they take the top performers out of a group. It could be 6, it could be 6,000, it could be 20,000, it could be the top 5 in a sales force of 20. And they say these are the behaviors that these people exhibit. And that's what's causing their success. But I would submit to you that if we did those same behavioral assessments on the bottom performers, they're going to have many of the same, if not all of the same behaviors. So behaviors do not distinguish between top performers and bottom performers. And the fallacy of a behavioral assessment is they're only looking at and comparing to top performers. So you got to look at the whole picture. And then the aptitude assessments tell us kind of what somebody knows, but not what they do. So when we're measuring knowledge and aptitude and cognitive capability, that's great for other positions, but it doesn't mean in sales they're going to be successful, because in sales, those assessments aren't identifying how that individual is going to behave, perform, think, and act when they're under pressure from the manager, to perform when they're under pressure from the client, when they have too much empathy, when they don't have the ability to ask hard questions at the right time because they're afraid of messing up their relationship. So there are all kinds of psychodynamics going on in a sales call that does not get measured by any of those other assessments. So I fell in love with OMG in 1995 when I got introduced to Dave Curlin. I'd been in the training business for about 4 years, was doing very well, was in the top 10 in the country with the organizations I had worked with to that point, selling and delivering training. And I ran into Objective Management Group kind of by accident. It was through a conversation with a colleague. So the more I got to looking into it, the more I realized that these were all the things that I knew, but I never had seen them on paper. When you think about what causes people to change, what in sales specifically, sales management, sales leadership, what are the pillars of change? What kind of resistance should we expect from those individuals about changing? And we would look at that as some of the findings we call will to sell, and the grit, if you will, that extra desire, that extra commitment to do whatever it takes, that willingness to be successful no matter what, and the ability to learn quickly and change and how to go about doing that to be more successful. Some of the other findings that nobody else measures is what we would call sales DNA. And these are the things that go on between the ears, underneath 4 or 5 layers that drive your conscious focus. And we don't even realize those things are going on a day-to-day basis. So what we learned in kindergarten, certainly we can use in sales. What we learned from our parents, we can use in sales. What we learned from our first sales job, most of that you can't use in sales. And what you learn from your first couple managers, you shouldn't be using in sales either. And so this DNA is really what prevents people from executing what you've taught them. We could go in and teach prospecting and the best techniques for capturing information and the 3 best questions and how to get someone interested and create the next step of the sales process. But those are words. And people can take our words, but if they don't have the conviction behind it, it doesn't mean anything to them. And so we can teach prospecting, and companies do it all day long. And their frustration is, well, we've told them what to say, we've given them the scripts, we've taught them what to do, and they just aren't doing it. And the reason they're not doing it is because some of these DNA factors are really preventing them from doing it. They can't ask tough questions if they have high need for approval. High need for approval is something we all have. It comes from our parents. When we're 2 and 3, we want to please our parents. And then we get into looking at our teachers in the early stages of school, and we want to please them. And then we get to be teenagers and we want to please our friends. That's peer pressure, right? And that's where we get in trouble with our parents and our teachers, right? So then we wake up in sales one day, because sales is a career of default, right? I mean, nobody goes to career day in 8th grade and says, I want to be in sales when I grow up. It's something that people default to. And it's, to me, the greatest profession anybody could be in. So we're bringing all this baggage from life into sales. And just like any other role, there are certain things that you can do to be successful and certain things that you shouldn't do to be successful. And a lot of those things that we learned growing up get in the way of sales, need for approval being one of them. Getting emotionally involved and thinking too far ahead in the sale, or thinking too far in the past about the opportunity, and trying to stay focused and staying in the moment is really important, because that creates great listening skills, right?
You're right. And much of what you're talking about here answers the question that a lot of CEOs and sales managers and executives have when they say, I just don't understand. And it's funny because we've seen this over and over again. people look at a resume, they see that somebody did really, really well, but there's so many different factors that involve in sales. This person was nothing more than a glorified order taker. Or for those who have had decades of experience, that experience has been predicated on building and nurturing relationships. And they may be really, really good at building relationships and taking relationships from one company to another, to another, to another, but you put them into a high, fast growth environment where they're supposed to go out there and close deals with people they don't already know. And that doesn't work either. So their resumes alone is no predictor of success.
And a lot of people look at too many of the wrong things on a resume. They throw resumes out because they got a spelling error. Well, we want people who can sell, not necessarily people who can spell. Of course, we want to be professional and look professional and not make ourselves look uneducated, but there's also things on a resume that lead a interviewer to ask the wrong questions. And so when you think about historical success does not predict future success. And one of the beauties of the Objective Management Group candidate assessment tool is we can't process it unless we have what we call a client profile that helps the client identify what is their ideal salesperson. Who are they selling to? What's the sales cycle? What are the price points? What type of organization is it? How much resistance will they face in the marketplace? How often are they managed? How tightly are they managed? How loosely are they managed? Are they getting leads, or are they going to be a true hunter? Do they have a hybrid role where they're going to go find new business and they have a list of accounts they have to grow and protect and keep the competition out of, and what I call infect? So once we have that, then that really weights the findings, and we've got over 180 unique findings that identify. So we all know that there's 21 core competencies in sales, and we measure them all. So when you think about the differences of those scales of economies of sales, there's different difficulty levels.
Sure.
And by looking at the different difficulty levels, that dictates what type of skills are necessary, what level of those skills are necessary, where are the limits, and what are the weightings that are most important for this salesperson to hit the ground running, to be successful. And we also are able to identify when should you expect to get a 5 times return on investment for what you're investing in this new salesperson. So that gives the company a whole lot of comfort and insurance, if you will, against a hiring mistake, which typically costs 3 to 4 times of what you're going to pay that salesperson for an entire year. Yeah. Think about the lost opportunity, how much time and effort you spent going through the interview process, what kind of resources have you given the salesperson, all the leads that didn't close that should have closed. And then companies make the mistake of not holding people accountable, not creating the urgency, right? Not teaching salespeople to create urgency with their prospects. And they keep them, they go, well, it's going to happen next quarter. Well, next quarter, well, the pipeline's building. Well, next quarter, well, next. And it's like they finally get so frustrated, then they say, okay, I can't do this anymore.
And before we even get to the onboarding component of it, and actually maybe we are getting to the onboarding part right now, because with salespeople, it's one thing to say you have the skills assessment and you check all the boxes and whatnot. It's another thing to be able to say, how does this person rank against everybody else that's taken this profile? And I think at last count, it's what, 2.2 million?
Times 180 unique findings. It's the largest sales database in the world.
So you look at, okay, how does this candidate compare to 2.2 million other sales professionals? So you're getting an indication right off the bat, how's this person rank? So all that stuff is great. So now let's say you go ahead and you look at the resume. There's a lot of things you want to look at in the resume that are important, such as if this is the type of person that goes from one job to the other, to the other, to the other, you can pretty much expect they're going to do the same thing.
If I could just push back on that a little bit. What a lot of companies don't realize is that the average salesperson tenure in the US is 18 months. And as long as the salesperson is moving to a new position that creates more responsibility and more income for them, and they're moving for the right reasons, I wouldn't fault them at all. So decisions about time frame of employment is a really bad one for most organizations who are doing hiring for sales.
I think this is where we may have a little bit of a spirited disagreement. So we do like to see people that will stay in a place for a while, but one of the things that leads to a high attrition in employment actually does come with the onboarding. Because what happens with a lot of executives when they decide that they're going to go hire somebody, the mistake is they look at a resume, they interview people, and even if they were sophisticated enough to say, I'm going to go with an OMG profile and I'm going to find somebody that has a high score. Well, on the onboarding, oftentimes what happens is they say, okay, here's the deal. This is your quota. Now go out there and get them, Tiger. Your onboarding, the quality of the onboarding, how supported the candidate feels they are is going to help to their retention, because they want to know, look, salespeople are a different breed, because salespeople, the more they close, the more money they make. They're very money oriented. They want to win a lot. And so they'll gravitate to the companies that feel like the companies and the executive team are doing their best to help them win.
I think there are fewer and fewer salespeople that are money motivated. So one of the things that we look at with the assessments is, what is their motivation? Are they extrinsically motivated, which is money, rewards, that type of thing? Or are they intrinsically motivated, which is they want a good place to work, they want to be part of something bigger than themselves, they want to help the community, they want to be part of something and provide a great service. And so if you think about millennials, in 2025, they're going to be over 50% of the workforce. For companies who think that you can just motivate with a bonus or motivate with a higher comp plan, that's no longer the case. I think if you look at onboarding, another problem that I'm sure you've identified, but we haven't talked about yet, is the manager. So a coach's job is to help people perform at a higher level than they can by themselves, right? So the management, the onboarding, asking the right questions in the interview. If you go and say to any salesperson, hey, this job is going to require prospecting and cold calling and reaching out to new people, how do you feel about that? They're going to go, oh, I love it. I love it. And it's kind of like saying, come on, Christians, jump in the pit with the lions. Nobody likes that. And that's okay. So we've got to ask questions in a covert manner that gets salespeople to give us real information and turn that first interview into an audition. Because the only way you're going to know they're going to sell is if they can do it in front of you. And I don't mean, Charlie, sell me this pen, or why are manhole covers round? It's more questions that cause the salesperson to be able to prove to you that they can sell. So I've never seen a resume that didn't say won President's Award. Well, I want to know how many other people won. How did you go about getting it? Did you bring in new accounts to get that? Were you working current accounts that you were given? How many of those new accounts were family or friends? What are the types of things that you were doing on a daily basis? What kind of activity? If you were prospecting for new business, let's hear your call. Let's role play. Tell me what you said. So there are a lot of things that companies do their best to do, and it's not their fault. They just don't know what they don't know.
There's a reason why compensation structures are set up so that there's unlimited potential and salesperson is always calculating their commissions. One thing for sure is that when you're interviewing a salesperson, the talk to listen ratio is so important, because if you're talking with a salesperson and they either cut you off or they spend most of the time talking or trying to convince you that they're somehow intelligent, and they're not asking questions, they don't seem genuinely interested, and so forth, that's another thing that automatically can qualify or disqualify somebody. One of the best interviews that I've ever had with a salesperson, I asked him point blank, we have a lot of people that are interviewing for this role right now. What makes you the best? And he said, well, can I ask you a question? I said, go ahead. He goes, frankly, I don't know that I'm the best person for this role just yet. Do you mind if I ask you a few more questions about this role before I can respond more appropriately? And I was like, wow, that was good.
Sounds like that salesperson's been through our training. It's the same thing, which is being able to display that as a candidate, you have the ability to handle hard questions from prospects, and you have the ability to politely, gently push back and take gentle control of the conversation. And that's done through listening and proper questioning.
Yes, which is super, super, super important. This is part of the reason why we use the OMG profile, because a lot of that information can be quantified in there and through the process. Just being aware of the time, Rocky, you and I could be talking sales forever and ever and ever. This is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. And so our listeners are looking to take their company beyond seven figures.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sales, whether we're building sales teams or creating top performing salespeople, what would you say is your number one biggest tip for CEOs wanting to take their company beyond seven figures?
That's, again, a little difficult to boil down, but I'll put it this way. Most CEOs that I know and I've worked with have a very strong financial go-to person. They have a very strong HR person as their go-to person. So if labor law comes up, somebody quits, they get a lawsuit, they immediately call their person. They have a go-to legal person. Oh, I just got an email, somebody trying to steal my domain. I just got an email, somebody has my name. I got an email that one of my end users is suing one of my suppliers, and so I'm getting named to this. What do I do? But they don't have a sales guru that they go to. And they depend on a sales manager or a VP of sales who has had, in the scheme of things, limited access to build sales teams. I mean, and this is not against VPs and sales managers. It's about the experience and the capabilities to apply best practices to any organization. When you look at what's the one thing that they could do, is they could find somebody like me or you, and I'm not trying to pitch me or you, but find somebody that has a tremendous amount of salespeople. So I think the one thing to go to that seven figures is get a sales guru who you trust, who's got experience, who's got the capability to give you guidance and help you build a strong foundation for a world-class sales team. And so the last several years, companies have been able to sell, like you described earlier, kind of by default, not because of what they're doing, but in spite of what they're doing. And in the future, in the very near future, the salespeople that were successful last year and the previous 4 or 5 years are not necessarily the people that are going to be successful in the future. Mm-hmm. And there's a different set of skills. There's a different set of capabilities that CEOs need to focus on. And even for those of the larger organizations that, need to right size, downsize, typically they go, well, we got to make some cuts. Where are we going to go? VP, what do you want to do? HR, what do you want to do? And you go through this list and criteria, and the criteria for sales is wrong. And they're using the wrong criteria to make the decision, instead of looking at the skills and the strengths that are necessary to sell and thrive in a recession. Maybe an added piece of advice would be find that guru, look at the breadth and depth of your sales organization, not based on history, but based on future potential and what is going to be required to be successful. And then make those moves based on data and science, as opposed to a gut reaction from someone who feels threatened about their part of the organization. A lot of times, organizations make the mistake of leading too fast. In other words, you can only lead as fast as your people can follow. Yeah. And if you lead too fast and your people can't follow, there's a disconnect. And typically, companies either grow and their employees grow with them, or the companies don't grow and the employees grow and they leave, or the companies grow and the employees don't grow and they leave. So we got to figure out a way to grow together. And we talk about loyalty. Companies don't spend nearly enough time creating a culture. And a sales culture is different than an engineering culture or an operations culture or a shipping culture or a technology culture. If you look at a CEO and you say, what do you use to base your decisions on about how you're running your company? Very rarely do you get sales. It's always something else. And you can't have a true sales culture if you have the sales prevention department getting in the way.
Sure. Totally get that. So, Rocky, I know that our time has come up at this point. If people want to learn more about you and get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I'm easy to find. Just type in Rocky LaGrone on Google and you'll see me. I'm the only one out there with that name. That is my given name, by the way. My dad was a boxer. Marciano was his hero, and I got the name, and he said, get tough or die, and I'm still here. So just look that up, or you can hit me up at rocky@salesdevelopmentexpert.com. Easiest, just Google Rocky LaGrone, you'll find me.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Rocky, thank you very much for being a guest.
Always a pleasure. Great to spend time with you, and welcome to Florida.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now,
Good
for
luck
those of
with
you who are listening and you're interested in taking an OMG profile for yourself, you're interested in understanding what you could do to improve your sales team, your hiring, and so forth, be sure to also reach out to us over at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. And we'll be in touch with you real soon. And I will see you in another episode.